Wow. Well, this is exciting. We have so many people here tonight. This is just great. And
Yeah.
writing an artist statement is, of course, extremely important. So we are so glad that you've all joined us to learn more from Dorothy Santos. Good evening. I'm Olivia Las Gonzalez, the Executive Director of San Francisco Camera Work, and I want to welcome you to tonight's Artist Toolkit, Writing Your Artist Statement with Dorothy L. Santos. Before we begin, we would first like to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this land that many of us call home. We are called San Francisco Camera Work, and what is now the San Francisco Bay Area is on the stolen and unceded land of the Ramayetosh Ohlone and the Muwekma Ohlone people, to whom we owe a collective debt. We thank the indigenous peoples of the Bay Area for stewarding this land throughout the generations. We've all benefited from being settlers on this land, and we are incredibly grateful. Please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from tonight with the present name of the place and the name of the original inhabitants. We've put a link in the chat so you can look up your area. Before I introduce Dorothy, I want to share a few upcoming programs with you. Next week, we are excited to bring you another artist talk in conjunction with the Forecast 2021 exhibit that's on view currently on our website. And oh, I'm sorry, actually, no. The artist talk is with Marna Clark, whose exhibit we have currently on view on our website. And that talk is Tuesday, May 24th from 6 to 7 p.m. Then we have a panel discussion that will happen on Tuesday, April 26th from 6 to 7:30, and that's Pacific time, called Tearing Down Stereotypes, Christian K. Lee and Stephen Shames on Undermining Media Bias, which is moderated by Dr. Travis L. Dixon. And then our last forecast artist talk will be a conversation between Katina Alexopoulos and Ashley Ross on Tuesday, May 10th, 2022 from 6 to 7 p.m. And now I am so pleased to introduce Dorothy L. Santos. We're very excited to have you here. Dorothy is a Filipino-American storyteller, poet, artist, and scholar whose academic and research interests include feminist media histories, critical medical anthropology, computational media, technology, race, and ethics. She is a PhD candidate in film and digital media at the University of California, Santa Cruz as a Eugene V. Cota Robles Fellow. She received her master's degree in visual and critical studies at the California College of Arts and holds bachelor's degrees in philosophy and psychology from the University of San Francisco. Her work has been exhibited at Ars Electronica, Rewire Festival, Fort Mason Center for the Arts and Culture, the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, and GLBT Historical Society. Her writing appears in Art 21, Art in America, Ars Technica, Hyperallergic, Rhizome, Vice Motherboard, and SF MoMA's Open Space. Her essay, Materiality to Machines, Manufacturing the Organic and Hypotheses for Future Imaginings, was published in the Routledge Companion for Biology and Art and Architecture. She is a co-founder of Refresh, a politically engaged art and curatorial collective, and serves as the executive director for the Processing Foundation. She's also an advisory board member for Power Plant / Arts and House of Alegria. And we will put her website in the chat as well. Before we begin, I want to note that closed captioning has been enabled and can be turned on in your settings. We will also be taping the program, which will be available on our website later this month. So now, without any further ado, let me turn the floor over to Dorothy.
Thank you so much. And everyone can hear me okay? Awesome. And if anyone has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. You can also raise your hand. I probably will be trying to navigate a lot of different screens. And I think also because I want to just pay a lot of respect to folks that might be experiencing Zoom fatigue. As I am, I think all of us have been for the past couple of years. I wanted to make certain that tonight's event was much more interactive. I don't want to talk at you. I want to work with you. I want to collaborate with you. And so hopefully tonight, if you are trying to, write an artist statement from scratch, that's fine. If you're trying to revise your artist statement, or if you're just trying to change it up, hopefully there's something in tonight's programming for you. Either way, it will be broken out into 4 parts. I will start it off with kind of examples of what I feel are really wonderful artist statements. I forgot to add one in there because I checked in with Olivia, and the majority of folks here tonight are from the SF camera work community. So I do have a photography, or I do have a photographer friend that I am more than happy to kind of share her project statements or her artist statements, because I think that they're really strong as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and there's going to be sound as well. So, and I'll tell you with each moment kind of what we're going to be doing. So hopefully everyone is ready. And welcome.
I also wanted to just add that if you all could mute yourselves while Dorothy is speaking so we don't get any feedback, that would be great. Thank you.
Wonderful. And so you should all be able to see my screen. It says writing your artist statement. Yeah, so I'm Dorothy Santos. You should probably, I know that, Olivia, thank you so much for reading my bio. I guess I wanted to share something a little bit more, a little bit less formal, but, because some of you might be wondering, for those of you who don't know me, because I saw on the, I think in the participant screen, I don't know a lot of you. And I think that's really exciting for me because I'm always wanting to meet new artists. I'm born and raised in San Francisco in the Mission District. And so San Francisco Camera Work, amongst many other, San Francisco-based organizations, mean a lot to me. So that's kind of where I'm from. But I am a writer. I've been doing art criticism before I went back to grad school. I was doing a lot of, writing about artists, features, reviews of shows, etc. But I never liked calling myself an art critic. I always just like calling myself a writer. I do also make art, but it's kind of categorized in the playable media space. So I do a lot of interactive fiction. So that kind of translates into, choose your own adventure. So I do a lot of experimental prose, poetry, of that nature. That's kind of what my work is about. I'm also an educator. I've taught at UC Santa Cruz, which is where I'm a graduate student. And I've also taught at San Jose State. And when I do teach at San Jose State, I have taught storytelling and social documentation. So I love stories. I love listening to stories. I love writing them, etc. But I think outside of that, outside of, working for Processing Foundation as their executive director, but also in my own graduate studies, outside of all that, I am a tarot reader. And I think a lot of that just has always lent itself really well to what I do, because we can be any archetype, whether it's the hermit or, the hanged one in any given day of like our lives. And I think that's really helped in my own kind of storytelling, because when I'm feeling blockages in my own writing, I always just turn to a tarot deck and say, well, what does the universe want me to write today? And that's kind of what I feel is important for people to know about me. So, I feel a lot of you are very familiar with artist statements. I think we all have a love-hate relationship with them. I know I do, because I have to write one, and I'm always reading them too. I will say, just speaking from experience, the artist statement is oftentimes the thing that I go to when I'm reading applications. I've had the privilege to sit on juries for Creative Capital, Knight Foundation, United Artists, etc. So it's one of the aspects of writing that really pull me in when I want to learn about not just where an artist is from, but also what is important to them. So, the first question, if it's necessary, unfortunately, yes, but I like to see it as a conversation. I remember the writer Bill Berkson, an art writer or critic, years ago. I went to a talk and he said, and I think the same applies actually to an artist statement, is he said, art criticism is like writing to your best friend that doesn't take any bullshit. And I think your artist statement is the same thing, honestly. Imagine your best friend telling your best friend what you do, and they can call you out pretty easily and say, well, that's not really what you do. Or oftentimes what I find with a lot of artists is that they're not actually including all of this rich, robust material that comes from their practices into their artist statement. So the second thing I also wanted to say is, what is it? Well, an artist statement is a way to communicate. So the how, the what, the why behind your creative practice and praxis. And what I mean by praxis is theoretically, when we are like taking lessons, in some of your case, you're taking photographs, or you're doing a series of photographs on a particular subject matter that you love and you care about. And if it's for social documentation purposes, that's the praxis. That's taking what is theoretical. That's taking the lesson of your own experiences with your subject matter and then bringing them out into the world. And then lastly, you're probably like, well, okay, show me. What do you think is a good artist statement, Dorothy? And I've got you. So again, before we get into the exercises for this evening, I wanted to show you about 3 artists that really have impacted and influenced the work that I do. Full disclosure, these are people I've collaborated with, I've been in conversation with over the years, but also just have intimate knowledge of their practices and, very much, attuned to the things that they say in their statements and read them and say, yep, that's Heather's work. And so the first artist that I want to talk about briefly is Heather Dewey Hagborg. And if anyone's interested, I know that there's a recording of tonight, but I highly encourage, and I'll put in the chat, and we can also talk about this during the discussion. We could talk about their different practices if you have questions about that. But with Heather Dewey Hagborg, her statement starts off with these questions. How much can I learn about a stranger from hair? Is it possible to fall in love with someone through their DNA? Could I make a virus that infects the world with love? Boom, right away, I already know the things that she cares about. And then you can see a little bit of snippet there from her artist statement. Quote, these are some of the questions that have inspired my work at the intersection of art and biology. The questions that intrigue me are philosophical, scientific, and political. Artistic practice for me is like playing detective in a novel that is always changing. There will be no grand reveal at the end, but the work is a process of constant discovery. Now, when you read Heather's statement, it takes around less than 10 minutes to read. And for me, I want to be able to get that from an artist statement when I read it. If it takes me longer than that, it kind of starts to make me feel like, okay, this is, let the art speak for itself, and it's not, I don't want to see that as I don't want to make it seem like someone doesn't have agency to make it longer. But I think the reason why I say that is your artist statement should be something that's kind of, it entices the reader or the curator or the artist collaborator to want to explore the work itself, because it's just the beginning. And so moving on to another artist, and I have one more and then we're going to move on to an exercise, is Indira Allegra. They did something a little different, which I deeply admire. If you go to their website, they actually have what they call an ethos. So as opposed to an artist statement, because they have project statements for each of their series of works or actual specific artworks, they have what they felt they wanted collaborators and artists and writers to know about the core tenets and values that are incorporated into their artistic practice. So I didn't put the whole list of the ethos in here, but you can see here, kind of towards the bottom, quote, space is not passive. Another one is, there's no such thing as blank or open space geographically, visually, and ideologically. And then a third one is, everything is animate. So just to be very clear, Indira, so with Heather is predominantly a visual artist, also does video work and has some performance pieces. Indira, very much genre bending in the sense that, they explore physical architectural spaces, as well as, exploring these relationships that they have within these spaces between human and non-human entities. So if you kind of think about their practice and you think about the ethos that they've structured onto their website, it really speaks to what you would expect when you delve into their portfolio. So I wanted to show this as, I'm not showing this as an anti-statement. I'm showing it as a different way of looking at and thinking about how a statement could look possibly. And then Lauren Lee McCarthy is the last artist that I wanted to speak to, but then I do have a photographer artist that I'm going to share a link to after this, and while everyone is kind of working on the prompts. But the last artist that I wanted to talk about before we get to the exercises is Lauren Lee McCarthy. Again, very similar kind of approach to Heather. So when you look at their statement, it starts off with, you can say, turn off the lights. You can say, wake me up at 7 a.m. You can talk to me right away. What does this have to do with Lauren? But it entices you. And then you start to kind of read the beginning of the statement. I'm captivated by the ways we are taught to interact with algorithms, how this shapes the way we interact with each other. Central to the work is a critique of simultaneous technology and social systems we're building around ourselves. What are the rules? What happens when we introduce glitches? So right away, this is a new media digital artist. At least you're kind of getting that hint, by words such as algorithms, technological, social systems. So you're thinking, okay, someone working within social media, someone working within maybe smart technologies, et cetera, but it draws you in. And I'm going to just check the chat really quickly here. Okay, I think folks are just, yeah, okay, great. So we're going to start off, and I want to give everyone some time. If you work well in the digital platforms, if you have a GDoc open, if you want to use your paper and pen notebook, and I think there's a lot of photographers in here tonight, so this is actually really exciting exercise to kind of start off with. But I wanted to also mention, I'm not sure, because I think maybe I'm in gallery view. I'm not sure how many people have a gallery view on, but I will post the link in the chat. Tonight's exercises are actually inspired. I modified them a bit for the Zoom format, but it comes from a book, Mapping the Intelligence of Artistic Work. And it is a book by Ann West. And it's published out of the Maine College of Art. And I'm going to go ahead actually, and I'm going to share that link with you in the chat right now, because I think it's a really amazing book. And I think it's one of those texts that it just kind of keeps on giving. So a lot of these 4 exercises that we're going to be going through, they're like such a minuscule version of what Ann West is actually having you do. So I highly recommend the book, not just for writing your artist statement, but for thinking about artistic documentation. There's nothing worse than not having the things that you need when you need to present them, whether it's at a show, at a panel, to a group of students, et cetera, because I know a lot of you are probably asked to give talks about your practices. So for part 1, I want you to take 2 images. It could be objects as well. They don't have to be images, but for the sake of the photographers out there, if you want to spice it up a little bit, you can grab objects in your home or your office or your studio. For anyone else who wants to work with images, please feel free to do that. The original exercise is actually 5 images, but I want you to choose these 2 images or objects and have them be something that informs your working process. And, some examples of what we're thinking about here are like a special pen, a pencil, a paintbrush, a stuffed animal from your childhood, image from a special momentous occasion, and then another kind of object or image that you could think of as an article of clothing. And so I have curated an album tonight that we're going to be working, with and towards, and I can also answer questions in the chat. So for each exercise that we're going to be doing, I'm going to give you about 6 minutes. It's the length of 2 songs on the Menahan Street Band album. We're only making it, I think, to song 8. I've timed it well enough, so hopefully it works. But here's the prompt. I'm actually going to also put this in chat. But this is what we're going to be working with. And before we start this first exercise, there's 4 exercises. They're very brief. Again, 6 minutes for approximately 6 minutes for each. Are there any questions? And you can put them in chat. You can raise your hand. You can let me know. And I'll also read the chat, or not read the chat, read the prompt to everyone as well. Okay. It seems like we're all good. So for those of you, and also because I know this is being recorded, the prompt is, how have these images or objects served your growth as an artist? And for example, how have they helped you find a stylistic visual language or figure out certain formal or conceptual issues within your practice? So these are the types of things that I would want everyone to answer in the kind of you know, for the duration of about 2 songs that I'm going to play. And again, if there are any questions, please put them in chat. But hopefully this will be fun because, like I said, I want everyone to feel that they will gain a little something from tonight's programming. All right, just going to go ahead and play some music. Awesome. Okay, so I'm so curious because I really love interaction. I don't really want to be prescriptive in that sense, but I'm curious as to, are there other things that came up for folks? I know that folks have been actually contributing to the chat. Thank you so much. Also, no worries. I want this to be kind of easy for everyone, easy going. It's supposed to be low stakes. It's supposed to feel this way. It's supposed to feel relaxed. But yeah, I mean, does anyone have anything that they want to add to what I think Stuart and Hillary, you've had some really great things to say in the chat about the different themes that have come up for you, or the image, how you've grown, I guess, from the images that you shared. And I think Stuart, you actually mentioned a few really great points about not necessarily noticing these things consciously when you're photographing, but you could also be responding to this kind of unconscious level. But right away, it makes me think that, yeah, that you're interested in the latent, and what kind of undergirds, these kinds of the common themes that might come across in maybe the photographs that you take when you look at them kind of en masse. So I really love that. But is there anything else before we move on to the second prompt that came up for anyone? And feel free to share in chat, or if you would like to raise your hand, you can do that too. Okay. I'm going to move on. Feel free to continue chatting. But yeah, the second prompt is really narratives of place. Hopefully we can get through the different prompts relatively quickly, because I know that conversation is always something that I always love doing with folks. And then, Thomas, thank you so much. Tradition, families, cameras, and photographs. Yeah, I mean, that's also something really fascinating too when we think about the next prompt about narratives of place. When you think of tradition, it's also oftentimes associated with place. So thank you for sharing that. And then Angela, the images I was focusing on inspired me to slow down and enjoy my process. Yes, absolutely. More of which is something I've had a hard time embracing in my photography. You know what? I'm not a photographer, but I have such a deep appreciation for photography. And I think a lot of that also has to do with the fact that, capitalism kind of makes us feel that there's an urgency to everything when there's not. So I really appreciate you sharing the focus in that. And Mark, thank you so much for sharing what you wrote and the images that you are working with. Please continue to do so. And just a quick note, I know that this is recorded, not to be redundant, but one of the things I'm thinking of doing also is cleaning up the chat when we're done, and then sharing some of the resources that you all are sharing in the chat, which is really wonderful. And then attaching it to the slides, because I want folks to have not only access to the recording, but access to the slides and some of the notes that I'm kind of getting from everyone today. So if we move on to part 2, we're going to listen to another couple songs, very short. They're about like 2.5 to 3 minute songs, narratives of place. So think of spaces and places that inform the work that you create. So again, examples, inside an art installation, a movie theater, your favorite family member's home. And then, it could be your go-to spot at a neighborhood park. I think from what I'm seeing on chat, there's a lot of this already coming up in the images that you selected or the objects you selected in the first prompt. And then the prompt for this second part, the narrative of play or narratives of place, I want you to recall a place in your life, and in engaging in all of the senses when you're thinking about this place, and how this place. So the actual question then is, how has this place affected the making of your work? And I want to just quickly say that I know for some folks, and I know when I work with students and collaborators and other artists, sometimes I feel what is such a hiccup, or so to speak, like a glitch. I can go back. So to this one, Fanta, is that it? Hopefully, I think, yeah. But yeah, narratives of place. I think the reason why I'm having folks kind of reach deep down into a very multisensorial way of looking at this in relation to your artist statement is, full disclosure, and I'm just going to forward back to the prompt here. Some of my favorite artist statements are, and I know this is such an art school word, and I try to find a different word for it, but it's very visceral. So when I feel that I'm reading a statement and it's like wholly embodied by the artist, and it moves me. And so this is kind of what I'm hoping for in these exercises, is that you start to reach deep down into your practices and get really into the kind of multisensory. And I say this because I, for one, and you know what, people are different, but I'm not moved by jargon. And I know that I'm in academia, but trust me, I'm so much more, all for the sensorial than I am for the jargon. And so that's kind of another reason why I'm wanting folks to really dig deep into what affects your practice, and like what are the senses that you can pull from. And it seems like so many of you already have this sense of what drives you and what makes you passionate. Oh, okay. So sorry that I went ahead. Now you know what the third prompt is. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to play these other two songs. I really want you to think about how has this place, the place that I'm asking you to think about, affected the making of your work. All right. And I'm going to put this into the prompt as well for those of you that are joining. So we're just going to start. And then the next two songs are really, interestingly enough, I did not plan this. It just worked out. The next two songs are titled Home Again and Montego Sunset. All right. Based off of the chat, I have to say you all are just you're rewriting or you're revising or you're sharing everything that should be in an artist statement. So I don't know why I'm here. But thank you for everyone contributing to the chat. I really appreciate it. And some of these very kind of these very vibrant and vivid images that you're bringing up, like these are all the things that I love reading in artist statements, actually. So even the chat alone is rife with so much inspiration for how you might proceed. This is going to go by really quickly, hopefully, because we only have a couple more exercises. Part 3 is time sequencing. Now, again, I know that there are a lot of photographers here, and so this is obviously going to mean a lot to you, and very different for different artists, obviously, because I know there's probably artists out in our digital Zoom audience here that are also working with video and film and different types of modalities when creating. So this is probably one of the other reasons why I wanted to do a prompt on time sequencing. So considering the idea of time or tempo in your work, does that even factor into how you think about your artist statement? I honestly would hope so. And the reason why I say that is because some people have durational practices. There are filmmakers that will, they'll do slow cinema. So they'll make films for like, 4+ hours, right? So and then there's other things that are, in our kind of age of social media, there's, Vines. Well, Vine doesn't exist anymore, but like there's TikToks and there's Instagram videos. I'm not on Instagram, but, there are people creating media that are 30 seconds or 60 seconds. So these are the types of things that you might want to talk about in your artist statement. So again, the prompt here is to consider the idea of tempo or time in your work. And so some of these examples, they're timelines, and it could be formal timeline or it could be kind of a loose timeline, whether that looks like a flow chart or it looks like, a visualization of a linear, like something very linear, like a literal physical timeline. But then there could also be like time lapse sequences. So, when you think of something that is like a slow motion capture, or you think of, a fast moving hyper, sped up piece of, of images, or even it could be in, your artistic practices, you're creating like GIFs. So, kind of like a looping image. So things of that nature. There's also repetition and intervals, and then there's duration and time loops, which I kind of talked about when we think about moving images such as GIFs. So these are, again, the types of things that I would want folks to kind of think about when they're thinking of the tempo and time in their works. And again, we'll work through 2 different songs. I don't think I feel for the kind of for the sake of time, the last prompt, because this is a 3rd prompt. I have one more prompt for everyone to work on. I might just have you do it for, like 5 minutes. We might work through one song and then just get into the conversation. Cause I really, I really want to talk to everyone. So the prompt for, this 4th prompt on time sequencing is, how do you move through time? How do you perceive time? What are the different temporal constructs that you work with? And the reason why I'm asking this also is because, I think in a lot of ways, and maybe this is my own fantastical, optimistic thinking, especially in the world we've been living in, that artists, especially filmmakers and, and photographers are, they're like time travelers. I don't know if you've ever seen yourself or perceived yourself as a time traveler, but, Hussein Rashid, who's, one of my friends and, someone that is a part of the YBCA 10. This is a fellowship that I'm working on with the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Hussein's work, he does tintypes as well as he does kind of more documentarian kind of like, or social documentation photographs of like the Black cowboys in the US, all the way to, the different, immigrant families that have kind of, traversed, their homeland to the US to be here, and what those experiences look like and feel like photographically. So, I say this because, a lot of people may not see themselves that way, but I do. So, yeah. So are we ready? I think we're ready. I'm also just monitoring the chat. I'm really loving the things that everyone is sharing, and I so deeply appreciate the engagement. But if we're ready for this kind of second to last prompt, And this goes by fast, yeah. So again, hopefully folks that are listening to the recording, you feel free that you can stop and then, elongate your time as needed for these prompts afterwards. Again, I'm going to go ahead and play music. I'm going to put these prompts into the chat, and then we will be close to completing the workshop portion. All right, let me play this. All right. So we're actually almost done and ready to have a discussion soon. Um, so I'm just commenting. Uh, there's so much activity in the chat. I couldn't help myself. Um, but yeah, I think the last thing that I wanted to say related to time, because I think something that came up in the chat was that a lot of people don't really think about, the durational aspect of their practices, and this shows up. I mean, especially not to kind of, I'm trying not to kind of, be too tangential, but this very much does show up in people's perception of an artist's time. If you think about gathering, whatever kind of modalities that you work in, whether it's digital or analog, and whatever practices you're doing, or if you're a performance artist or you're a filmmaker, etc., the time that it takes to prepare for a shoot, the time it takes to deinstall, the time it takes to, prepare your subject matter, it's all actually quite durational. And sometimes, whether if you feel that it helps you or not, I wanted folks to reflect on time and tempo, because it makes the reader, and it makes people interested in your artistic practice, know what's involved. I say this because, again, I mentioned in the chat Hussein Rashid's practice of tintypes, and I have physically seen Hussein set up the tintype studio, like a makeshift tintype studio at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, and just marvel at the time, the care, the intention that goes not just into photographing the subject, but in the actual setup itself. This is not, it's such an embodied practice. And I want folks to really understand that, about when you are writing about your own work, to not shortchange yourself. If it is laborious, you probably should say that and write it, because people will get a sense of what is involved in what you're doing. I'm just going to double check the chat. Okay, yeah, thanks again, Carol and Rebecca and Mark and France from earlier. I read your comment. This is all really, really great. So because we only have about 4 minutes left, and I wanted to honor the time dedicated to the dialogue, I'm not going to play music, but what I will say is that part 4 is a keywords exercise. So I wanted people to feel that they could do this on their own, because it's going to take me about 4 minutes to explain anyway. And I really, really want to be in dialogue with everyone here. But it's essentially pulling words from your writing. And it doesn't matter what kind of writing. It could be from your notebook, it could be from your journal, or papers that you've written. If you've written papers or articles, those are really valuable. That's a really valuable source material. And I think an example that I also pull from, because he's one of my favorite poets and writers, Ocean Vuong, in a book of poetry that he wrote, and I can, I can kind of look for it on the internets here, but there was one poem, one of his more impactful poems that he wrote. It was lines from his notebook, and in my mind, I thought, my goodness, those are some of the best. Oh yeah, I have yet to read that book, Susan, but I do love his writing, his poetry. And I'll share the book that I'm talking about too, because it has the work that I'm talking about. But it just inspired me to think, my goodness, that alone, like your notebook alone, can be the source material for your artistic statement. If you kind of find what I call kind of these radioactive words, you know what I mean? So it is not Time is a Mother. I'll share it, but thank you. And some of the examples I wanted to bring up, obviously, these are nouns, person, place, or thing. But, some of the things that are meaningful to me, and I wanted to give some examples, when I think of bell hooks, I'm such a lover of love. And I think that's another reason why I read tarot. It allows me to be close to people almost instantaneously, even if we're strangers, because we end up talking about these different kind of contours of life and just lived experiences. But love is really important to me. I know that sounds very saccharine and it sounds very sweet, but that I don't want to be disingenuous to my own kind of configuration of my creative practice in mind. Janice Lobo Sapigao, microchips, that's another meaningful, like, key word for me, because my dissertation is actually on voice synthesis, speech generation, and assistive tech. And I'm also looking at different ways that engineers and programmers and creative coders are, creating these different types of configurations of code that then create these technologies that we use. But also, down to what I'm thinking about, I also think about San Francisco. It's my place of birth, and that's a really kind of key word for me in the work that I do, as well as assistive technology. That's a smattering of examples for me. I am going to put this in chat. I know it's 6:59. We should be moving on to dialogue. But yeah, I would encourage you to begin by pulling out keywords from your own writing. Again, it could be from your notebook, your journal, papers, etc., and then to generate a word map. And when you're reading through the writings and highlighting and illuminating the words that jump out at you, try to separate them out into verbs, nouns, and adjectives. And these are the types of things that you can kind of play around with within your artistic statement that start to kind of hone in on the things you really are not only just passionate about, but you want people to understand about what you're trying to convey in your paintings, your drawings, your photography, your film work, your performance work, et cetera, et cetera. And before we move on to dialogue, I just want everyone to remember to just write, speak, and emote from your gut. I mean, that's kind of the best place to start. And to remember what is driving your practice and your praxis, and to check in with a trusted friend, collaborator, and or mentor. Like I said, your best friend, and this is no judgment on friendships, but I, for one, know that my bestest friends will always tell me the truth, even when it's a bit uncomfortable, or it's just like, gosh, did I really just convey what I'm trying to do in that way? They're the ones that will tell you. And people that really care about your practice and your praxis are always going to note the things that you should include, that you might be, again, shortchanging yourself. You always want to remember the richness and the robustness of the practices that all of you are doing. And yeah, so I just Mark. And if folks want to keep in touch with me, that is I did not choose that email, by the way. That I would never do that. R is my middle initial. So someone pointed out it's Dr. Santos, or Dr. Santos at ucsc.edu. I did not pick that email. I'm not that presumptuous. But that is my email. And I am on Twitter. I'm not on Instagram. So if you want to connect on social, you can connect with me there. I'll put that in the chat as well. But I'm really looking forward to just being in conversation with everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Mark.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing well.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Through all the discussions and through all the things that you've been saying, my artwork is led from the heart and from the spirit rather than from the head. Mm-hmm. And I find out that when I go back and look at what I've been doing, then my head comes into line. Mm-hmm. Is this anything of what you've been trying to say? I mean, I'm kind of confused here.
Yeah, no, I can understand. I tried to do something a bit experimental because I didn't want people to be in their heads so much. And that's the reason why I'm pulling from a very kind of multi-sensorial place. I oftentimes feel, and I see this actually in artist statements that I read in different types of applications, that the sensory part of people's practices actually is suppressed and repressed in many ways. And then the heady part comes in. And that's what I was trying to not do tonight. I think the reason why I pulled from these different resources, and again, I'm not sure if anyone saw this, I put in a chat, this is the book I was pulling from, Mapping the Intelligence of Artistic Work. And yes, I will put in the prompt, the last prompt in the chat, by Ann West. I kind of felt that a lot of what she's talking about in the book is pretty substantial. It kind of is a nice go between the sensory or the more kind of heart-based soul-based kind of thinking around artistic practices, as well as kind of the academic, if you want to go into that realm of it. But that's what I was trying to do. Like tonight for me was an experiment, but it was also something I just didn't want to talk through and talk at a formulaic way of doing an artist statement.
Because what I find that I do, I find that so many people do not see where they're at.
Mm.
And I focus on where my eyes and my heart focus on. And then I put it together, and then my mind fills in, the timeline of what I'm trying to do. And I talk with my hands. So I mean, this is where I am as a photographer.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm making sense, but this is.
Oh no,
So,
go ahead. Sorry, Mark. Go ahead. Feel free to finish. I'm sorry.
But so all the other things are, sort of out in the outer periphery of a universe of where I'm at. And then it comes into focus later. But I love the advice that you gave of keeping a journal and then drawing in words later on. I mean, that to me is a great advice, and I love it. So thank you for that. That's a gem that I can really use.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I'd love to see that word map, or that, if you're willing to share in the future, that would be really wonderful.
Now, is this the same thing as mind mapping?
It's similar, but I think word mapping, it's just more of a sense of getting much more perspective on the words that really radiate and resonate with you. So I feel like mind mapping can lead itself a little bit more into the abstract, which is not where there's time for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to get a perspective of where the two are. So thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mark. Oh, I think what is there? Oh, okay. Yeah, I will definitely put that last prompt in the chat. I'm so sorry. I owe you all that. Yeah, are there any other? Oh, Olivia.
How do you do this?
Yeah. I wanted to say, like, as an arts administrator, what I often see with artist statements is that what you're saying, what the artist is saying, and the images don't always like match up. So there's often a lot more intent in the statement than is visible in the images, or vice versa. And so, like, I guess from the sort of curator's perspective, I would say, like, if you're writing your statement, look at your work, and then, like, just ask yourself, is this true? Is this really what I'm trying to communicate? I find I do that myself with my own work, where I'm sort of like, here's what I want to be doing, but then you go back and you look and you're like, well, is that really that evident? So it might end up being that you tweak your work as a result, or you tweak your statement as a result. So just wanted to add that.
Dorothy, hi.
Hello.
Hi, Stuart. So you mentioned earlier a distinction, I think, between practice and praxis.
Yes.
And I didn't quite get that. So could you just go over that again, please?
Yeah, no problem. That's a really great question. So practice is obviously like this very embodied experience. And I actually have a podcast project that I do with my collaborators, Anna Mina and Xiaowei R. Wang. And one of the things that actually came up recently was the distinctions between work, labor, and career. The reason why I'm mentioning this contextually is, it's a similar kind of distinction with practice and praxis. So practice is the thing that, we're making the artwork, we're doing the creative coding, we're setting up, we're finding the subject matter, we're shooting, for our photographs. And then, it's the very embodied experience of the creative process versus praxis, which is, it includes that. it doesn't mean that one precedes the other. I don't like to think of it as a chicken egg thing, but some people might. But praxis has more to do with, taking a theory or a lesson and then embodying it,
Okay.
in some way, shape, or form. And that doesn't always involve a practice. So I think like they can be married together if you wanted it to or not. It really depends on what's involved in your creative approach.
Okay. Yeah, it sort of sounds like a philosophical underpinning of the work that you do.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Well, thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question, because it is a really great question. And I oftentimes feel with students and collaborators that I work with, I do often get that. They're just like, well, is a praxis necessary to have a practice, and vice versa? And it's not. It really is dependent upon what drives you and what you want to create out into the world. I mean, my mom and I even talk about this, where sometimes my mom, she just really loves beautiful photographs. She loves nature photographs. And in her mind, she's always like, well, it doesn't, like, why can't it just be just that? And it can be, but yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stuart.
Thanks.
Shelley has a question. Shelley has a question.
I'm going to unmute myself. I have a question, and I'm currently writing an artist statement for a particular portfolio that I just recently put together. And I'm writing a bio, and I'm wondering, the portfolio that I'm putting together right now is pretty specific to concepts that I've been working on for a long time, but they're not necessarily it's not necessarily the embodiment of all of my work. So I'm trying to decide what's the difference between what I would write in my bio and what is very specific to this portfolio, which is very personal. And I feel like the artist statement is really true about that specific batch of work. So, but it's not a statement, an artist statement that describes who I am as an artist necessarily. It's just, does that question make sense?
Yeah, I mean, if just to reiterate, or like maybe what I should do is reflect back. So I think what you're asking is that you're putting together, right now you're working on putting a portfolio together for a very specific purpose that is different from your bio, but obviously it has these kind of elements of your bio in them. But the distinction is you are talking about something, I don't want to call it like hyper specific, but it almost sounds like a project statement. And then so I think from what I'm understanding of the question, it almost seems as if you're asking, well, what if it's more of a project statement and not necessarily an artist statement, because my bio actually encapsulates some of those themes that I'm working with already.
Okay, so there's such a thing as a project statement.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I did not know that.
Yeah, and I say that because Liz Moran, who I some of you might have showed up a little later, no problem. I'm gonna stick Liz and I we worked on our masters at the same time, and she's such a talented photographer. But she creates project statements for each of her major series of works. And I think that speaks to a little bit of what you're talking about, Shelley, because I think she does have a separate bio, but I think as a part of her creative practice, she doesn't do artistic statements because they're so specific. Like her projects are very, very hyper specific. So that might be something that you might want to look at. It might be the source of inspiration. And you can just feel free to contact me, because I have other artists that might have what you are also kind of looking for too.
Okay. Is that Elizabeth Moran?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Elizabeth Moran.
So, I see it on there, but okay.
Yeah, she goes by Liz. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you so much.
That really helps. Yeah. No, absolutely. These are like really fantastic questions. So thank you. And again, oh yes, yes,
over here.
Hi, I'm just like, hi, Thomas.
I don't know what your screen looks like, but I only see a short strip of people.
Okay.
But I've been doing photography since I was a kid, and I was an architect for all these years, 40 years, and photography just kept piling up. And I never really pursued it as a career. It was just something I did. And along comes the pandemic, and I'm looking at all of these bits of work that I've done over all the years. And I'm trying to create an artist statement sort of in arrears. You know, it's hard to look back and say, oh, this is what I did and why I did it. You know, I've forgotten why I did it. I've forgotten that the images existed literally in a lot of cases. So I'm kind of in this stuck thing. And because I grew up in that tradition, you know, of the great photographers, quote, quote, it's hard to separate myself from all of that. My artist statement ends up looking like it's trite or overused or something.
And so Thomas, your conundrum here is how do I write an artist statement about something that has been seemingly I don't want to use this word, but this is the one that kind of comes to mind, but it almost becomes like, because you're an architect, so it almost becomes like the photographs themselves become almost a palimpsest. Did I say that correctly? Palimpsest of like a memory or memories. And so one of the things that I would kind of, because when you were talking and I was listening to you, I thought to myself, my gosh, that would make an incredible, like in my mind right away, I see your statement serving more as an exercise in how one, okay, let me just say it, because I know I'm being a little bit academic-y when I say this, but you know, there is a writer who I absolutely love, a historian, Saidiya Hartman, who wrote, I can actually share. Saidiya Hartman wrote like Venus in Two Acts. She's also written, my goodness, what else has she written? She's written some really beautiful, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments. Thomas, the reason why Hartman's work comes up for me is because what you are engaging in with all of the kind of massive photographs that you've taken over the years, as well as having that gift of being an architect, is what Saidiya Hartman calls like critical fabulation. So when you look back at an archive, what do you surmise of the place, space, context, historical, social, that have come up just based off of, say, like 20 photographs that you're looking at? What, you know, if you went to, and I'm just naming a place, Thomas, where are you based? I'm not sure where you're based.
I'm in Oregon now, but I came from the Bay Area and Sacramento, spent a lot of time in the mountains. So my home is sort of the Sierras.
Okay. Oh, that's right. You said earlier in the chat. So what would it look like if you took this amalgamation of a place like the Sierras, and then you started to kind of critically fabulate what happened there? You don't need to know exactly what happened. You don't need to know, events that took place. Rather, what you can speak to are these really vibrant memories that kind of make up like why those pictures even mattered at that time. It doesn't matter if you can't remember or don't remember. And I think Hartman's work really could be inspiring in that sense for you, because that's what she works with. You know, how do we fill in the gaps between the things that are factual versus the photographs that tell us something maybe different?
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to say. The memory of there and the memory of the mind.
Yeah, no, totally. And thank you, Olivia, for adding that to the diaristic aspect of William Eggleston. That's like that's actually a fantastic example. Thank you. So
first name, I missed that.
Oh, William, it's in the chat. And then the person I mentioned, I'm gonna put her book in the chat here for you.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
No, thank you. I really think you'll like Hartman's work. She's a beautiful writer. I mean, she's a historian. She does literature. She's really phenomenal, and she works with archives, and the way that she talks about how photography has informed her scholarship is just really, I mean, I highly recommend her. So I feel like you get a lot out of it too.
That sounds great. One of the problems, of course, is that architects write in code.
Yeah. Yeah,
We
that's
don't
very
write,
true.
right? I mean, everything on a drawing is in little bits and pieces. So it's, yeah, it's
Yeah,
another struggle. Well, that's a different, a different
yeah,
workshop.
I get that. Fanta. Thank you, Thomas.
First of all, I just wanted to say that I got to pull a lot of really beautiful things from your presentation. So bless your heart. Thank you.
Oh.
And I had a small question. So I have never had to write a formal artist statement before.
Okay.
Like definitely have had to maybe like put words in different kinds of language to like what I do and hope to do, but never anything formal.
Mhm.
And I think in the past, I've even been like very reluctant to refer to myself as an artist just because I don't know, it kind of just feels like living life and doing life and creating art all at the same time, kind of all the same anyways. So how in, I guess maybe writing an artist statement for the first time, how would you like make space for the unknown? Like maybe I'm thinking like, you know, all the questions that you don't have answers to yet, and maybe you don't have a favorite medium yet, and maybe you have a praxis but not a practice. Like how do you, I don't know, would it be maybe something more to leave open, or is it okay to like make space to say that you don't know and you're still figuring it out and you're like becoming it and creating it all at the same time?
No, that's, I mean, Fanta, this is also one of the reasons why I was so excited to kind of work with you all, and why I do, you know, have a commitment to artists, like just not just in the Bay Area, obviously that is my where my heart is, but just broadly with artists and kind of working on these different aspects of their practices, because I love to see what happens and what comes up. And oftentimes I am told that. I actually hear that quite a bit, even from I think mostly from my students. I'll just say, well, I'm not even, I'm 20. What do you want me to say? And a part of me is just like, no, you don't understand. You just created this beautiful world, you know, and you don't, and it's like, I know that it's challenging to find words to it, but I also work with artists. I work intergenerationally because I think a lot of people, they don't work in the digital. I work with artists that don't work in the digital, you know, and I think in a lot of ways it speaks to kind of the expanse of, you know, the challenges of writing an artist statement. I just wanted to say all that. I know I feel like I just said everything and nothing at all, and it is philosophical in nature. But the reason why I put Indira Allegra's link in there, you know, there are Black and indigenous non-binary artists working and living in the Bay. They put an ethos together. So, you know, Indira, very much a seasoned artist, someone I deeply appreciate and adore. Very similar to Liz Moran or Elizabeth Moran's practice. They do have project statements, but something that they wanted to do that is separate from an artist statement is, you know, was to create an ethos, because in their way, it's also this kind of decolonial method. Well, why should I tell you what my artist statement is? Why don't I tell you by what is important to me? So maybe a way of looking at the artist statement is creating your own, you know, ethos, your list of values, your list of tenets that are then incorporated in what the art, that are then incorporated in the art that you're making. Because what happens is when you start to figure out all of the things that are meaningful and valuable, well, maybe I don't want to use the word value, especially, you know, but I don't want to be capitalist, but you know, like, if you are looking at the things that mean something so much, like they mean so much to you, maybe from that you will start to pull the places, the spaces, the nouns, verbs, pronouns, or whatever, all the things that are then kind of make up what is then embodied in your practice. Again, I feel like I kind of said everything and nothing at all, but you know, it's like, you know, maybe that's a place for you to start, because you know, especially the last thing I'll say, Fanta, is the, you know, and hopefully I'm saying your name correctly, Fanta. Okay, Fanta. Yeah. The last thing I'll say is, I oftentimes feel that when people say, you know, I don't even know if to call myself an artist, just like, oh, okay, so you are a real artist. So, you know, like reach out, like, let me know. I'm more than happy to take a look at what you're thinking through and be in conversation that way as well.
Very helpful, Miss. Very appreciated. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I know we have like 7 more minutes, Olivia and Jean. I'm not sure if anyone else has other questions that they want to ask. Again, I'll be saving the chat. I did put a link to my presentation. It is a view only link, so you'll be able to take a look at it and maybe follow along with the recording. And again, I'm just going to put my contact information here. For anyone who wants to keep in touch or ask me something at a later time. But yeah, I think we have a few more minutes left.
If no one else has any questions, I have a quick one again.
Oh yeah.
more of your time.
No.
Would you say it's best to make your statement shorter and distilled, or more of a read? You know, I'm not sure how to explain it, but
yeah, no, Shelley, that is also a really good question. And I say that because I have read all of it. I've read statements that are literally like 150 words. If you could be that concise, that's fantastic. But I've also read statements that are like an essay. So like, 800 to 1,000 words. I oftentimes feel a happy medium is great. So if I think one of the things that I would suggest to artists, and this is more logistical than it is, again, really not trying to be prescriptive. I'm thinking about the different juries I've sat on, where the happy medium of being 400 to 600 words. And the reason why I say that is because it's just enough that makes, people want to like look at your portfolio, but it takes into account different things like themes, medium, and also experience, and again, it depends on whether you're writing a project statement versus an artist statement. Or like even like Thomas, sorry if I'm putting Thomas on the spot here, but even when Thomas said, oh, architects work in code. Well, I work with programmers and engineers with the Processing Foundation. I'm the ED for Processing Foundation, and we're focused on open source software for artists. So oftentimes the artists that I'm working with are just like, well, my artist statement is my code. Do you want me to write more about my code? And it's like, no, but lay folks will not really know how to interpret that. So oftentimes we have to kind of suss out, well, what is it that you're trying the code to do? Like, how are you working with a particular algorithm to like, do web scraping on the internet? Like, why is the web scraping that you're doing of this particular data set important? And then that's when you start to kind of realize, oh, I do have actual words to speak to this. But that is the happy medium for me, at least when I'm reading statements. I feel like if you have to go longer than that, it becomes a bit prose-like. And I would want the artwork to speak for itself versus the artist having to kind of because that's very laborious for you as an artist. I wouldn't want you to feel that you have to touch upon that. And a lot of it you would inevitably touch upon in like interviews that you do, panels you're asked to sit on, guest lectures you do. Like you can get into all of that at that moment or those moments, Yeah, I hope it helps, but I can also, share more with you if you like later on too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, can you share more about the mapping that, why do I recommend it? So it's the book, you can't really see it. Okay. But I recommend it because, well, first of all, it was really hard for me to decide which exercises to go through for tonight that I could have easily modified. But it literally goes through different modalities of how you go into your artistic documentation. I think that's one of the reasons why I recommend it to artists and other collaborators. I myself, I'm a huge fan of Beth Pickens. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Homework Club. It's a really wonderful, it's very reasonable too, but you go on a webinar once a month, and there's different aspects of artistic practice that she covers, such as like money and, art. Also, she covered artist statements actually. But one of the folks in community actually recommended this book, and I did my research and I ended up ordering it, and it's phenomenal. There's so many exercises in the book alone that can be modified to your own practice. And in and of itself, it's almost like a meta practice. Like you start realizing when you do documentation of your own artistic practice, that alone can be its own artwork. And that's one of the reasons why I highly recommend it. You don't realize until you start to create from the amalgamation of your practice that, it's moments to feel like, oh, this is why I need to create an archive. This is the reason why I need to write a statement. And I feel like Ann West does a really phenomenal job of actually getting into that in just this one book. So yeah, I really love it. Let me look for that Ocean Vuong book too. All right. Oh, it's called Night Sky with Exit Wounds. I'm going to link to it. I wish it wasn't to Amazon, but that's fine. Yeah, but it's also on if you go to the poems section or book section on Vuong's website, you can see it there. Yeah, but it is called Night Sky with Exit Wounds, and that's where you'll find the poem from his notebook. He created, like I said, an amalgamation of all these phrases from his notebooks, and he turned it into a poem. It's really lush and beautiful, and also really devastatingly heartbreaking too. I think, we're at time, but then there's like a question: how do you spell Beth? Beth Pickens. It's like this, Beth Pickens. And then what is temporal constructs? Is it past, present, future? Oh, Rebecca, that is such a philosophical question. But I love, and the short answer is that temporal constructs could be anything from like a 30-second TikTok video that all the kind of Gen Z, like my students essentially are making. But then something temporal could be, slow cinema of like I think Douglas Gordon is the person, he's the artist that created 24-Hour Psycho, where he slowed down one of the scenes from Hitchcock's Psycho to 24 hours. Like that. That's very much a temporal construct. That's a TLDR, too long didn't read version of it. Oh, thank you so much, Rebecca. But yeah, it's 7:30. I know that y'all have to like eat dinner or do other things, and I'm so appreciative of you all. And please, my contact information is here, and please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm so grateful for everyone here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was wonderful.
So inspiring. Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We will try to get the video packaged in a way as soon as possible. We're a little short-staffed, so it may take us, a week or so. We will send out some resources, however, and the chat right away to you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was wonderful. Bye.
And Olivia and Jean, do you need anything from me? Do you need to do you need anything from me? Do you need to debrief or anything of that nature?
I'll email you tomorrow. That's
okay.
fine. Yeah, we're good. Thank you so much. This has been really wonderful, and I think everyone got a lot out of it. So we really appreciate it.
I did too. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was very inspiring.
Lovely.
Learned a lot tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Well,
Have a good night.